The intention, the title, From Tips and Tricks to Success, already carries some of my theme. A lot of folks are looking for kind of those golden tricks to get into university, undergraduate school, graduate school. And really there are very few tricks. It's about putting your best foot forward. It's about organizing your materials. It's about understanding your checklist. It's about getting your questions answered. It's about applying early enough. Those are some of the themes. We have a relatively small group, so I'll be able to answer some of your questions directly, I hope. But I've also put here on this very introductory slide, you can see the scan code that will take you to a guidebook that will actually go much more deeply than we'll be able to in today's session. One question that I have, and I should bring up the chat. I was trying to do this before we get started. So I see. Oh, so Louis, you're in Tampa, Florida. I'm actually in Jacksonville, Florida. So we're not too far apart. Moscow. So Moscow, wow. So you're burning the midnight oil there. And who else do we have on? So those are the only folks I've seen who have identified where they are. Is anyone else from a different region of the world? No. Before
Yes, I am. My name is Giselle. I am from Paulo, Brazil. Pleasure to be
from Brazil, Giselle. Okay.
Yes.
So you're not in too different of a time zone. Or what time in the morning is it there?
We have 2 hours difference. I am 2 hours in advance. So here is 11:20.
11:20. Okay. Well, then you finished your coffee by now. I still have mine. I went to a concert last night for Rachmaninoff Rhapsody performance. It was lovely, but I got home late. So,
Nice.
I woke up and needed my coffee this morning. So I'll ask one more question before we kick in, which is, are folks coming here to get information about undergraduate school or graduate school or general admissions decisions? Most of the people who are coming to this summit are obviously looking for information around TOEFL testing, English testing, etc. I can certainly provide further information on that. I do that every day. But the theme of this really was to set a moment for those who might be interested in a kind of broader scope. I want to make sure I'm not missing the mark and boring everyone with that topic. I can answer other questions as well. Who is in the process of applying? So I see graduate is interesting for me. Okay, that's from Daria. Anyone else? Undergraduate, good for my students. Excellent. I like to see that, and I'll try to broaden the topic. Daria, since you're looking for information for your students, one thing I'll point out is there are a lot of opportunities out there for providing practice materials and organizing principles and getting documents together. So as we go through, I'll try to put some information on that. Okay, I'll go ahead and kick off then and give you a sense of where we're going in this presentation. So this is just a quick outline. I'm going to walk through this and then we'll have question and answer. And since we have a relative small number, we can do that via audio or we can do it via chat. I'm going to talk about best application, deadlines, etc. Also, there are some resources that Edegree provides. Philip, my thanks for introducing Edegree. We were launched by the Educational Testing Service, really with a mission to provide resources for students. We've done that. We're now independent from the Educational Testing Service, but we grew out of that mission to provide access and equity for students. And all of the resources that we provide, which are quite extensive, are free for students. So we really are a resource that you should check out and share with others because you won't find as many capabilities, for example, preparing for TOEFL anywhere else that are simply free and available along with people who can give one-on-one advice. Then we're going to get to frequently asked questions. And actually, I think I'll probably end up bundling that with a Q&A. Since there are just a few of us, there's no reason to go to standard questions. I can actually go to your questions. So I've told you a bit who we are. There are three main areas that EdAgree can provide help with. The broadest is simply support for international students. And we have a student success team that will provide one-on-one or group advice. We have office hours, so people can check in and come and ask questions. We have free tools such as practice for TOEFL, English diagnostics, university matching. All of those are available on our platform. Oh, and that little code at the top, I think, takes you to our platform. My team is much more technically capable than I, but I think that's what those things do. And then we also have general preparation advice for universities and a set of universities that we partner with very closely, working with their admissions teams. So we're not a broad shop working with all universities. We have about 50 universities that we work closely with. So I'm going to start with the best application, the process that one goes through to get things together. I'm going to suggest that this first one is a little bit cart before the horse, to use an idiom. Before you choose a university, I think you should back up and think about you and think about your goals. This is often a misstep, whether we're talking about international students or any students. There's often a tendency to try to choose the most prestigious institution rather than the one that is best suited to your goals. Again and again, I talk to students who want to go to just Harvard or Yale in the US, and they miss great opportunities like University of Kansas, or let's say I'll give you a university that you've probably never thought of, but let's say you're interested in mining or minerals or the oil industry. University of Wyoming, for example, there at the bottom of the page, which is not that highly ranked in terms of the broad ranks, but is very highly ranked in terms of that program for doing degrees around energy. That's what you need to think about, is your goals, and then begin to think about a university. So you need to look at factors like cost, requirements, application fee, location, size, the student life. The student support is very important when you're talking about an international student coming into the US in particular. Universities in the US put a lot of resources into student support, but it's a mixed bag. Some provide very excellent support for international students and some do not. So it's very much worth checking out. Another factor that's very important is cost. So a university degree can cost per year a range of $20,000 a year up to $60,000 a year, if we're talking about a kind of no scholarship situation. So if you go out there and just apply at random without consideration of that factor, you may get into a university that is very highly ranked that you might want to go to, but you might not be able to access it. So before you put that list together, think about what is actually feasible from your perspective. Are there any questions? I was moving very quickly through those points. Any questions, since there are a few of us? Oh, and I see, Giselle, advanced studies for international dentists. Am I reading that correctly? I'm going to assume yes. I don't know, frankly, I don't know about dentistry in particular. There's going to be a more advanced degree, obviously, for dentistry. Doing medical studies can be complicated in the US and often quite difficult for international students to access. I know that University of Kansas has some programs that are related, and we can talk offline about that. That is one of our partner universities. I'm going to assume that there's some others that we're working with that have those opportunities as well. So if we're talking about something coming up soon, my first advice here is don't be guided by the deadlines in terms of when you submit applications. Obviously, after the deadlines, you cannot, but the earlier you submit information, the better. So sometimes, and this is actually particularly true for international students coming into the US, there's often a limited number of seats that the university is considering. And the admissions team, while they will say they are looking at applications up until that deadline, they may actually begin to fill seats before that deadline comes into play. So you will probably be considered as long as you get your application in before the deadline. However, as you get closer and closer to that deadline, there may be a smaller number of seats that you're competing with. So if you get there early, all of the seats are open. There might be a relatively smaller number of applicants at that point. So you might be chosen to fill a seat. Close to the deadline, there will be many more applications in the pool, but much smaller number of seats. So I think you can do the math. Your chances will be much better in many cases if you get your application in earlier. Another factor here, and I'm sure that you are aware of this, the queues for visas right now, queue meaning line, so a synonym for line, the lines to schedule a visa interview can be quite difficult right now. So I know that there are some countries, students that I'm speaking to right now, particularly from Nigeria, Ghana. I know that there are a number of other countries, and maybe you guys can speak to your own experience here. But students can be waiting up to 9 months even sometimes just to be able to get a visa interview. So the application for the university may go quickly and smoothly. The university may issue you an I-20. That's the necessary document for you to be able to do your visa interview. But then you may have to play a waiting game. All right. And I'm trying to keep my eyes on questions as we go here. The next topic is simply a checklist. So you need to gather a bunch of documents together and have them ready. And if, as in the case of Daria, you have a set of students that you're working with, it can be tough to ensure that all of your students are getting their materials together in a cohesive manner. There are services out there that can help with this. I know one company that works with a lot of international schools is called CIALFO. I'm not sure if you guys are familiar with that. That's a paid service. Edigree offers many of those same capabilities for counselors and agents to gather materials together. And we do it again for free. But I would suggest that you have some kind of platform or tool so that you can go through the checklist that your students must complete and make sure that they're getting all of their documents together. Many times the students will be waiting or won't have it together, and then they try to apply to the university. The university comes back and says, well, you know, we would like to consider your application, but you're missing your transcript, or your transcript needs to be translated into English, or we need a picture from your passport. So it's very helpful to start to gather those things together early on. So let's see, can you type the name of this agency? Daria, do you mean CIALFO? I'm going to assume so. Edigree is pretty easy to see. It's right there on the screen. CIALFO is the name of the company. Oh, I wrote CAF. Let's see, CIALFO. Make sure it goes through here. Are you able to see that? CIALFO. So CIALFO they have a great platform, and it's very helpful. They have alerts for parents. It's a very sophisticated platform serving high schools in particular. I've been very impressed with them, and they're growing quickly. Again, they're not a free service, but they're one that comes to mind that's very helpful for organizing materials. So another thing that's necessary in the context of applications is getting your financial statements together. It's not necessary, it's not a requirement for all universities to do an application. Some universities require it upfront. Some wait until after you're admitted to request the information. They will always request it in order to send out your I-20, because in the I-20, you need to be showing that you have financial capability. And financial capability cannot be, I will be able to go if I get a scholarship. It's rather showing that you're going to be able to pay your tuition independent of a scholarship. So sometimes it requires scratching together a lot of evidence, and that has to be done early on so that you're able to present that in a convincing way to the visa officers. So these are the basics of documents that you have to go through and provide. Let me go to the next slide here. This is an example. These are with personal information removed, but these are examples of transcripts. Transcripts, some know what that means, some don't. A transcript is simply a statement of your academic record. If you are applying to a graduate program, the transcript that is important will be of your undergraduate studies. Let me make sure that we have an understanding what undergraduate versus graduate means. When I say graduate school, I'm talking about what some might refer to as postgraduate studies. That would be for a master's, a PhD, for advanced degrees. If we're talking about an undergraduate degree, that is a degree right after you study in high school. And it can be confusing because internationally, high schools are sometimes referred to as colleges. In the US, we also have community colleges or four-year colleges, which are for undergraduate degrees. So think about elementary school, junior high, high school. Those are all your secondary education. When you graduate from high school, you go on to undergraduate school. If you finish undergraduate school and wish to continue, you go into graduate or postgraduate studies. Anyway, the transcript that you will need to provide should be, if you're coming to the US, should be translated into English. You don't really need to set up a different kind of format or standard unless a school demands it. Admissions teams are quite used to looking at different transcripts from different countries, but they do need to see the subjects that you studied. And beyond that, it needs to be an official transcript in many cases. So not simply something that you take a picture of with your phone and send. So sometimes they will consider you and admit you based on just a picture, but they'll often require the official document to follow. So you'll get a conditional admission. Better to do it up front, though, to get the right document. Every time you have back and forth with the admissions team, your chances of getting into the university decrease significantly. Okay, so this is simply more advice, making sure that your transcripts are clear and legible. If you're doing this with a picture, make sure you have a clean surface and that the picture is quite clear. Admissions teams often get a picture with, the right upper corner of the transcript missing, and then they just have to come back to you and say, please try again. English proficiency scores. The topic today that you guys have been going through is largely around TOEFL. I know that a lot of the presentations are around TOEFL. You know that there are a lot of other tests. So you're going to, in most cases, need to have such a test. Not all. Some of the universities that Edigree is working with are beginning to waive English proficiency scores. If you can show a transcript or a history of sufficient education in English, that will sometimes be sufficient for the university. Also, they may ask for an interview in place of a transcript. So this is where it's important to not just get your list of schools that you're interested in, but school by school, look at their requirements. And then there are scores beyond English proficiency. For undergraduate, there is SAT and ACT. These are achievement tests. They're not the same as a national exam that students in many countries face that are quite difficult subject-based tests. The SAT and the ACT are more generic multiple choice tests that just they give a very good sense of English. So sometimes if you have an SAT, a university will say you don't need to have further English testing. For graduate school, it would be more like a GRE or a GMAT for medical school. an LSAT for law school, etc. Let's see. Oh gosh, and I was ignoring questions. I see, Daria, you have a question. What is the I-20? If I heard that correctly, you did. The I-20, and actually we'll have more on it in a moment, but since there are a few of us here, I'll go ahead and answer. The I-20 is issued by the university that is admitting you. When you go to do a visa interview to study in the US, the officer, the agent who is interviewing you will ask for your package. And the first thing they will look is to see if there is a university in the US that issued you an I-20. It is a statement that the university has in fact accepted you. And it also shows that the university is confident you have the financial resources to cover your studies. So it's a piece of evidence that you will need before you can do your visa interview. So one reason that it's very important to think about the I-20 is sometimes the university will be loose about your financial documents and what you need to put up front. But once you get to the visa interview, there's nothing loose about that anymore. They want to see evidence that you can cover your studies financially. They're looking for that statement from the university. And they will also be looking for evidence that you intend to return to your home country. That's a very important, a key aspect of successfully getting your visa. You may intend to go to graduate studies and so on, but you really need to have a convincing argument about how you intend to take your studies from the US back to your home country and to provide a resource then in your home country. The intention of that is to have a kind of, really it's to have an export industry of education out of the US that brings benefits into the home countries of international students. So it's a very, very important aspect that's often missed in the interview. And I think it's the primary reason that visas are turned down. Having said that, most students do get their visas. So I think probably over 90% of students who are applying and who have a university placement succeed in getting a visa. Let me see. Okay. We don't really need to go through this one. This is a broader point. When you are thinking about a particular university, you need to look at that university's policy when it comes to English proficiency, when it comes to finances, whether they have scholarships available, things like that. This is actually taken from the EdAgree platform. For all of our universities, we've laid out the information about those universities very clearly. I've already mentioned this one, so I'm going to go through it very quickly. This is just an example of an SAT score report. Sometimes you will need this, and sometimes you will not for undergraduate school. An example of a place you do not need it is California. California has recently dropped the requirement for SAT broadly across the state. The GRE and the GMAT, et cetera, are for graduate school or postgraduate school. Proof of finances, we talked about this, so I'm going through the list with the slides behind them now. But this is just a statement that you are able to cover your expenses. It has to be relatively recent, and it has to show that you can cover your first year of studies. Now, do students always use the finances that they prove when they do their actual studies? No. International students at universities, and I myself, when I was a university student, often have jobs when they're on campus. I actually had 3 jobs simultaneously while I was an undergraduate student. You can work as a student to make money to help cover your university expenses. However, you cannot say when you're applying to get a visa, I'm going to cover my expenses with work on campus. Those are not yet guaranteed funds. So it's not going to be convincing to the agent. You have to show that there are sufficient resources that already exist in your home country that will be able to cover your tuition and your expenses. Once you get to the university, you don't have to spend all of those resources that your family or parents proved they have. You can then make as much money as you want to or can at the university. So it may not be that those funds are necessarily used, but they have to be shown. I hope that's clear. Let's see. Copy of passport and letter of recommendation. So copy of passport. And I see, Daria, why do they waive the GRE until 2024? That's we'll have to go through that one separately, but that is simply universities and states in the US are quite varied in their policies. The GRE is going through a period of some transition in terms of how it is accepted and how it's used. An example is a lot of law schools now, for example, are taking the GRE as a sufficient indicator as opposed to the LSAT, or they're taking both. Some universities are beginning to drop the GRE as a requirement because they have decided that the undergraduate transcript might suffice in terms of showing sufficiency. So it's going to depend very much on the case that we're talking about, and I'm happy to take that offline with you. I'll make sure that you guys have my email address so I can answer those questions specifically one-on-one. You will need a copy of your passport to show that you have one and that you're going to be able to get your visa put into your passport. Letters of recommendation are quite often your choice. You can decide to have one or not to have one. My advice to you is whenever you are given such a choice, put your best foot forward by choosing that item. If you have a letter of recommendation, that will be considered in your application, even if it was something that you had a choice to provide or not. And since the letter of a recommendation will presumably say something very good about you, you might as well put it into your application. The same is true of another item we'll talk about in a moment, which is your personal statement. If the university gives you a choice to do a personal statement, do it, because that's going to be your opportunity to let the university know why you're great. Yes, it's work for you, but it's also a way to put your best foot forward and get into a university with more certainty and possibly access things like scholarships. You want to make the university want you. Let's see. So this is going through a little bit more detail about the timeline for visa. And it includes that point, Daria, about the I-20. So once you get into the university is when you get your I-20. Only after that do you finish your visa application. Here is the wild card right now, step 4. Internationally, that can be a really big hurdle for you. So make sure you schedule your interview as early as possible. That means as soon as university applications open up, you should be applying and trying to get your I-20 for admissions so that you can schedule your visa interview, because they may say 6 months from now you do your visa interview. Now, a university will typically be patient these days while you're waiting to get your visa. But I've had many cases where students have had to defer their entry into the university. Maybe they got in for fall of 22, but now because of the visa interview, they're waiting until spring of 23 or fall of 23 to actually begin their studies. Universities will typically be flexible about that timing, but you don't want to wait 6 months to start or a year to start just because of a scheduling issue. And I'm really not exaggerating. It's happening to a lot of students. Let's see. Personal statement. This is a subjective factor in your application. And I'm going to talk about hard and soft factors in more depth in just a moment. Let me make sure I'm okay on time. I think I'm okay on time for a moment. But really, keep in mind that the personal statement is going to give you an opportunity to tell your story. Your transcript may be a wonderful document showing that you are academically gifted, but it says very little about you as a person other than that you are smart. And one thing you need to convince a university of, if there's any level of competition, is that you are a good fit for their community. A university is like a small town, and the admissions team is going to think about how you fit into that town. What value do you bring? Does the university bring any value to you? If there's a connection between you and the university and the community, then the admissions team is going to be much more excited about adding you to that town, that community. So that's one of the things that the personal statement can do. All right. I'm looking to see if there are more questions. Feel free even to break in with audio, since there are not very many of us here today. But if you type messages, I'm trying to look at the bottom to see. This is just more about the personal essay. I'd point to the bottom bullet here more than anything else, in addition to what I just said. Don't make your personal statement a list of accomplishments. I did this and this and this and this. Instead, tell a story about yourself, something that you did, something that you learned. If a personal statement is required, then it means that the admissions team is looking at thousands of personal statements. And your personal statement needs to stand out and put a real heavy weight on that first word, personal. It needs to be about you. It doesn't need to be a statement that you wrote a novel or that you won a Nobel Prize. That's not what the admissions team is looking for. They're looking for a life event that was important to you and that says something about your personality. Where is your heart? What do you care about? And because you care about those things, you then care about going to this university. That makes it much more likely from the university's perspective that if they give you an offer, you'll accept that offer. Their job is to put students in seats, after all. So they want to find someone who loves their university. Okay, we've already said this one. Although I will point to the middle bullet point here, the English 360. Since so many folks today are interested in TOEFL in particular, probably, but also probably IELTS or Duolingo or other English tests. The English 360 platform is freely available on the Edigree platform, and it has the ability to prepare your speaking, your writing, an English diagnostic. The speaking and the writing, by the way, use the same background technology as the TOEFL does for scoring. So you can get a sense of what a score looks like relative to the TOEFL scoring algorithm. That's freely available. The technologies are called SpeechRater and eRater from ETS. Those belong to ETS, but they are freely available on the Edigree platform. So if you want to practice your speaking or your writing, you could do a lot worse than to come to the platform just to practice those. There's no commitment and no cost for doing it. Let's see, next slide. Scholarships. I get a lot of questions about scholarships, as does the Edigree student success team. Here's the frank news about scholarships. They're really, really tough to get. And even if you get a scholarship, it doesn't mean that your studies will be free. So schools will often offer partial scholarships. You most often don't even need to apply separately. So if you're applying to an Edigree partner university, like Hope College, there is a Hope Scholarship that's available that covers the bulk of tuition. For Kansas University, if your transcript shows academics above a certain level, you will automatically be considered for a scholarship. But those scholarships do not offer full rides. They typically don't even touch your living expenses, food, housing, things like that, entertainment, getting a car, transportation, otherwise. they will typically cover part of your tuition. So it's quite rare that you can get your expenses down per year in the US to something less than $20,000. Now, if you can get it to $20,000, you probably can cover that with student work. So if you can get it to 20,000, you can show that 20,000 available out of your home country. You might not need to use that 20,000 in your home country. You would have to show it. And then once you get to the university, you can probably get a student job. And I can talk more about student jobs if you would like. So here's Daria. Can online master's students get a scholarship? The quick answer is yes. It's typically going, these are very specific questions. So I can tell Daria that you're dealing with students who have very specific questions. It's going to depend on the school, and it's often going to be in conjunction with online and on campus. So sometimes they will have like a 1+2 or 1+3, where they might provide some discounts for online. If there's an issue of cost being an obstacle, there is one university that we're working with called Nexford University. That's I can write them down here. It's an interesting model that I want to point out, and I can provide you with more information. Well, there's more information on our website, actually, on our platform. Nexford is an online university. And rather than charging students, $30,000 a year, they're charging per semester as a kind of subscription model. So instead of having a $30,000 bill across per year for getting a master's, they might have something like a $2,000 a year bill, but they're getting a US accredited graduate degree or undergraduate. They offer undergraduate as well. So that's a much lower cost option available to students. And then repeating the point that you're not going to be able to get a visa without proof of funds. EdAgree does provide some assistance to students who come through our platform. So if students apply to an EdAgree university, and if they're admitted, then EdAgree will provide a $500 scholarship. That doesn't go very far in your studies. It does look good on your resume or your CV to have that scholarship. You'll be an EdAgree scholar, but it does also cover your application expenses, some of the expenses getting set up at the university. So it also can be a nice thing to be able to put in front of a visa officer. So we're really offering that to be a helpful part of the process as you go through. So if you're interested in getting the $500 scholarship, come to the EdAgree platform. It's an automatic consideration for students who come through, provide their materials, are admitted to an EdAgree university. Let's see.
By the way, Marlo, I just Dorothy said she's okay starting a little bit late, so you can run over a little bit. It's okay if you.
Oh goodness, yeah. What is my schedule here, Phil? I'm trying to.
Yeah, it should be at the top of the hour, but you're okay. A few minutes over is fine.
Okay, I might go a couple of minutes. Thanks for that heads up, Phil.
Yeah, no problem.
We're almost at the end of the slides, and I want to open it up for further questions, even though we have been taking some as we go. So here's a slide just letting you know some of the stuff that EdAgree does, picking a university, helping to apply, and helping to get admissions decisions. This is a platform issue. If you come to the platform, that's all going to be very clear to you. I do want to point out again, because of today's theme, that we provide English language practice. Especially I would say using E-Rater and SpeechRater in conjunction with your TOEFL preparation can be quite useful, and it's free. So nothing to thumb your nose at if something is free. If you have any questions, so I'd say take down this email. I know, Daria, you had in particular a number of questions here that were specific. I will be happy to field those or one of the student success team. But if you write to students@edagree.com, that's going to go to the full team. You can also send an email directly to me. My email is my first name, Marlowe, which may be available on the screen, but it's MARLOWE, Marlowe, at, again, edagree.com. So Marlowe at edagree.com will come directly to me. Visit the platform. I also want to point to our study abroad guidebook. So that code there should take you directly. It will go much more deeply and better than my scattered presentation. That's really the long and the short of it. Are there further questions?
Hi, Marlo. Well, I
Oh,
have
hi,
one
Phil.
about your experience. Do you know they have some restriction about the age of the students? Because
Restrictions, sorry, restriction about what?
elder students.
You said elder students?
Yes, that's right.
No, by law, no.
By
so-
law, but
Yeah, US universities cannot consider admissions decisions on the basis of race or age or gender or personal identity. So no, that will not come into play.
do you have a kind of statistic about these things from the college about the age, students' age? Do you have
So,
statistic information about that?
there's I don't have statistical information. I'm sure there is some available. I mean, it's certainly the case that you will not see very many undergraduate students, who are 60 and above, for example. But those students are not barred from studies. So they can apply and they can be admitted to undergraduate programs. It's simply not frequent in the population.
All right, thank you.
You're welcome. And if you have an example, by the way, of a university that's barring people based on age, I'd love to see it, because that should be contrary to federal regulation.
Yes, I
so
understand that sometimes they could do like that in the interview, just blocking, but it's not kind of that is really open. I think if it happens like in a similar ways, like
yeah,
hide away
it could. You're right. They could do it under the table, but they're not supposed to.
under the table. Thank you. Okay.
And one other factor that I'll say, and then I will stop, because I know that we're at time, and I don't want to give Phil a tough time scheduling. I promised I would say something about hard and soft factors in the application process, especially if a university is competitive. And there are some universities where more international students are trying to apply than there are seats, obviously. In those situations, it's typically not very helpful to have a TOEFL score of 120 versus 110. Now, you think a 120 is better than a 110, but if the university says our requirement is to get 100 or above, really, once you've gotten 100 or above, the door is open to that university. If they say you need a transcript that shows a 3.3, once you get above the 3.3, the door to the university is open. Those are what I call hard factors. They're objective. Once the door to a competitive university is open, you still haven't gone through that door. The way to go through that door is no longer the hard factors, it's soft factors, like the personal essay, like your interview, showing that you have some special connection to that university. Those soft factors are what will pull you through the door in a competitive situation. Now, there are some cases where a university is less competitive and they may have more seats available than international students. In that case, they really just want to see that you have enough finances, that you can speak English, and that you have sufficient academic preparation. So there's a little bit of a difference in how soft factors are treated based on the university, but it's something to consider with regard to the level of competition. Okay.
Thank you so much.
And thank you guys. I really enjoyed today. If you have any further questions, do not hesitate to reach out. This is what I do every day. We have a lot of information on the platform, and we're there to answer any questions you might have.